Hey there everyone, welcome to the 4.1 review. We're basically solving quadratic equations by factoring and by square rooting, the square root method, and a little bit by using the graphing calculator. So let's get started. We're starting with factoring. Factor and solve x squared equals negative 7x minus 10. Okay, so it needs to equal 0, so everything needs to be on one side. So I'm going to plus the 7x and plus the 10 over to the other side. And that's going to give me x squared plus 7x plus 10 equals 0. Nothing combines, okay? So you have your ax squared plus bx plus c. It's in that form. What are your factors of 10 that add up to 7? Well, I know 10 is 10 times 1 and 5 times 2. And 5 plus 2 also equals 7. So that'll turn into x plus 5 times x plus 2. And then don't forget to write equals 0. So, what are the two numbers that you can plug in for x that'll make it equal to 0? Well, if I plug in a negative 5 to this binomial, that'll make that go to 0. And if I plug in a negative 2 to that binomial, that'll make that go to 0. So this is the final factored form, and then these are my solutions, or your roots, or your x-intercepts, or your zeros. You know, they go by 4 different names. But yeah, that's it to that one. Let's do the next one. Still factoring and solving, only we have much larger numbers. So what I like to do is I like to see if I can identify a greatest common factors. There's something that goes into 15, 39, and 24. So what you want to do is you want to think of the factors of the smallest number, which is 15. And, you know, if you want, make a list. 15 is 15 and 1, 5 and 3. Okay, so does 15 go into 39 or 24? No, it doesn't. Does 5 go into 39 or 24? No, it doesn't. But does 3 go into 39 or 24? Yes, it does. 3 goes into 39 and 3 goes into 24. 3 times 13 is 39 and 3 times 8 is 24. So 3 is our greatest common factor. Alright? So, since 3 is our greatest common factor, I'm going to divide everything by 3. So let's write it out again right here. So dividing everything by 3, you're going to put your 3 on the outside. Anytime you factor something out, it goes on the outside. So 15x squared divided by 3, 5x squared, minus 39 over 3 is 13. So 13x, and then 24 over 3 is 8. Alright, and don't forget the equal 0, which I did up there. Okay, so now what's the next step? You got to multiply that front number to the back number. I forgot my squared right there. So we're going to factor. By the way, I hope you're writing small on this problem because there's a lot to write. 5 times 8 is 40. Middle number is negative 13. Factors of 40 that add to negative 13 are 8 and negative 5. So I'm going to say 3 because I factored that out. So 3 times x minus 8 times x minus 5 equals 0. Okay, so since you multiplied that 5 to the back, it's time to undo that by dividing it out. So let's see here. I'm going to have 3 times, and 8 over 5, does that simplify? It does not. So it'll stay 8 over 5 for the moment. And 5 over 5 simplifies to 1. So x minus 1 equals 0. So from this step here, we can identify our two solutions. Our two solutions would be x equals 8 over 5 and x equals 1. because those are the two numbers that you could plug in that'll make it go to 0. Now, to fully factor it, just take that fraction and put it up front. So the final factored answer is 3 times 5x minus 8 times x minus 1 equals 0. Alright, so if you think of it like this, if you plug this in right there, 5 times 8 over 5 minus 8, that'll actually equal 0. So that's why we do it right there, so we don't have to solve that. We don't have to figure it out. We can just look at this and flip the sign. But yeah, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for these two, I guess 3 things, since there's 2 x answers. But I want to see you fully factor it and give me the solutions. Okay, that's as hard as it's going to get. This is the most complex one. Alright, so from here on out, we're going to simplify some radicals. So if it's not a perfect square, you need to simplify the radicals. So 52. What numbers multiply to get 52? I know it's 26 and 2, and I know it's 13 and 4, and 52 and 1, but that doesn't help. So 26 and 2, none of those have a square root, but 13 and 4 do. So I'm going to rewrite this as the square root of 13 times 4. And the square root of 4 is 2. So I'm going to rewrite this as 2 times the square root of 13. Because if you could take the square root of it, write the square root on the outside. And then don't forget to write your plus or minus. So that's the first one. The second one, the square root of 625. If you type that in, it'll tell you plus or minus 25. That's all I'm looking for there. There's nothing special about that one. It's a perfect square. This one, 27. What are your factors of 27? I know it's 9 times 3. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this as the square root of 9 times 3. And I know the square root of 9 is 3. So I'm going to write 3 square root 3. And don't forget your plus or minus. And that is the simplified version of square root of 27. Okay? So, you might have to use that skill when you're simplifying the problems with the square roots. I might have to do it on this one, or one of these, okay? So let's just keep going. Solve by the square root method. Is there anything on the outside of the parentheses? No, there's not. So let's go ahead and square root both sides. That's going to leave me with x minus 1 equals plus or minus 5. Okay? Then you'll add the 1. Don't make the mistake of adding the 1 while it's still in the parentheses. You can't do that until you get rid of the square, which is on the outside of the parentheses. So x is going to equal 1 plus or minus 5. So let's do the two answers. This means x is going to equal 1 plus 5, which is 6. And it's also saying x equals 1 minus 5, which is negative 4. Okay? So that's the final answer. Okay, looking at the next one, I'm going to start off the same way. I'm going to square root both sides since there's nothing on the outside of the parentheses. And that'll give me 4x minus 2 equals plus or minus 8, because that's the square root of 64. And so what I like to do from here is just make two equations. 4x minus 2 equals 8, and then 4x minus 2 equals negative 8. Okay, so it'll be the same steps. I'll still need to add 2 and divide by 4 on both of these. So adding 2 to both sides gets me 4x equals 10 and 4x equals negative 6. And dividing by 4, we're going to get some fraction answers, but they can reduce. So 10 over 4 is going to equal 5 over 2. Or you might see it as 2.5. And then negative 6 over 4 is negative 3 over 2. Or you might see it written as negative 1.5. But yeah, those are the two answers. Okay, so this next problem, it's a little bit different than what we've seen, where it says the square root of x equals plus or minus 7. And so we're typically seeing it with like x squared equals something. So just think about it like this. You can kind of do it in your head. If you're square rooting a number, what number do you square root to equal 7? And that would be 49, okay? The square root of 49 is 7, plus or minus 7, okay? So the answer would just be 49, all right? Now, from a mathematical standpoint, how would you do this? Well, what's the opposite of, if I want to get this minus 2 to the other side, I'll do plus 2 to the other side. If I want to get this times 4 to the other side, I'm going to divide 4. So what is the opposite of square root? And that would be, excuse me, that would be squaring. So what you're in essence doing is you're squaring both sides, and the square root squared just turns into x. So in essence, it's saying x equals 49, okay? So that's a mathematical standpoint. Maybe it made more sense to you when I explained it when I was writing in red, but yeah, that's all that's going on there, okay? Okay, so 7a, I'll do 7a, you do 7b. Plug this into your graphing calculator and pull up the table and make sure you can get 5 good points. I try and put the vertex in the middle when possible, and then make sure you're at least graphing the x-intercepts, okay? So I'm going to plug this into my graph calculator and get some table values. Okay, so here's a screenshot of me graphing it in the Desmos app. You can see I extended the table a little bit to show you the x-intercepts, because I want you to pull out at least 5 good points, but I also want you to make sure you can graph the x-intercepts. So in my table that I wrote, I put the vertex 1, negative 9 in the middle, because that's what I like to do. You get the best looking parabola when you put the vertex in the middle. And so I didn't put the x-intercepts in my table that I wrote, but I did graph those 2 points. So if that happens to you, just do the same thing. It's not a big deal. You just have to graph a couple extra points. But yeah, there they are. I graphed all the points that were on the table, and then the other 2 points that were the x-intercepts. And that's really all there is to it. Yeah, just type it in, look at the graph, Control-T. You can do that menu, analyze zeros for these points. And if you ever need to, you can do menu, analyze minimum or maximum, depending on which way the graph is opening. In this case, this is a minimum. But yeah, that's all there is to that. So I'll go through and I'll give you some answers or some hints to the problems that you do, okay? Okay, so here are the answers to the first two. X equals negative 14 and negative 3, and then x equals 7 and negative 1. 3b, since there's kind of less work to show, but I do want you to show some work, I give you the answers, I put them out of order, okay? So the answers down at the bottom are out of order, so that way it's just not a dead giveaway. So when you work them out, you'll get one of those 3 answers at a time. 4b, you should get plus or minus 3. 5b, you should get 1/2 or 0.5 and negative 1.5. Negative 3 over 2 is negative 1.5, negative 1.5. Let's see here. 6b, I didn't give you the answer. Just kind of either think about it or just square both sides, really. Think about the square root of what number would equal plus or minus 12. On 7a, I forgot to write down the
x-intercepts. Oh, I talked about them, but I just forgot to write down. So I made a note, x equals -2 and -4. And that's what I gave you on 7b. You should get 4 and 1 for your x-intercepts. And so, yeah, I want you to get the 5 points, put the vertex in the middle, and graph at least 5 points. You might have to graph more like I did there, but yeah, that's really all there is to it. So I hope this helped. Good luck, everyone. Bye.